despite the fact that we may have the lowest prices, and that our goal is to provide a little bit of financial support to these people, or not financial support, excuse me, an avenue for them to earn a little bit of extra money.
When they have the parking lot sale here, are you able to sell your product here at the parking lot sale?
We could.
And what is the food and the food regulations on selling food that you grow or make?
Very open right now.
Okay.
Very, very open now. There was a bill called the Assembly Bill 1990, which basically
Go get the towel.
Basically started allowing community gardens and school gardens, et cetera, to sell without much paperwork involved. So in talking with the University of California food advisor Rachel Searles, I don't know if you know her, she runs the Master Gardener program. She's also working heavily in cottage food and developing the kind of farm-to-table products and things like that. We were able to do some work and talk with Ag, and they said basically, you guys are ready to, you can go forward with selling from your community gardens, which are actually people's backyards. The one thing that we do have more constraints on is how we sell, meaning we have to be direct sales, in that we have to be present to sell it.
Okay, so you can set up a website and say, hey, we've got this and stuff.
We can set up the website, but the delivery has to be one-on-one. We can't use FedEx. Not that we'd be able to afford that, but we can't use a third party to deliver it out. So, for example, I did have an order form that was electronic. People could order it, but then I would have to make personal contact with them and collect the money and get the box to them.
Now, I've been on the men's website, and it doesn't say anything about the La Colectiva and stuff. So what's up with that?
Just another thing that needs to get done.
Because they do have, they have a PR committee and people who make the website. So you wouldn't actually even have to make that page. You would just need to say, this is what I want it to say. Sure. Could you do it? And I know that you're busy doing 7,000 other things, but...
Well, I think the bigger issue right now is the regularity of the project.
Okay. That it's not always happening.
Right. Or that we're working on this rhythm that we can get going. Right. When I came on a year ago, there was no La Colectiva, and we started this idea. In fact, the original idea was to sell produce to restaurants in Pacoima to help foster community, which is a fabulous idea, except that we had difficulties with our growers being able to produce enough of a consistent harvest to really be of interest to the local restaurants. Because obviously they've got a business that runs day by day, and we're working with small plots of land, and we get our things every couple months come out. And so until we start working on plans where they're growing it successively and there's enough people producing that we're actually able to produce, I've got this project as a second.
So you need a consistent product line in production. Because you do have some really friendly, like Mike's Cafe, some really men-friendly places that would...
Well, Mike's, for example, received a copy of our box. Fruta and Cultura, I contacted with them. But Fruta and Cultura was quite clear that if we're going to be buying products from you, we need to have a more consistent supply. It can't be one spike of fabulous produce and then 3 months without anything. And I said, well, that's really beyond our capabilities. But what I like the model we have, but the one thing I would like to change is I would like the end result of the receivers of these produce boxes. Ideally, I would like to see it in mixed community, even if it means we're receiving slightly less money on a per pound basis or per box basis. So many of the people that were actually participating in the project and around the project were interested in the project. They just weren't ready to part with $30 to buy a box of vegetables, which I totally understand.
Yeah.
So we'll hopefully be looking at ways to decrease our price but maintain our quantity.
Now with the home gardening, how do you pick the people who will have the gardens in their backyards? And it's the raised garden beds, right? And they also, you give them the composting bins too? Is that what I had seen, or no?
We talk about we give training on how to compost. We will identify where they can either receive free compost, which incidentally is the top of Paxton Street. It's a place where the LA County has free compost available for anybody that wants to bag it up.
I had no idea.
Lopez
And I live right there.
The Lopez Canyon Environmental Center. They have a drive your car up, bring a shovel, bring some bags or boxes, and take as much compost or mulch as you want. So we're kind of working with them. Sometimes we go up there and bring compost down to men so that people can do it from our parking lot. But so we provide the garden beds, we provide soil, which we actually purchase. We provide tools. We provide tools, and we provide the seedlings and or seeds. In terms of how we select it, I have been operating on a kind of rolling admission. I mean, if you're in the building and you hear about us and someone knocks on my door and says, I heard about this program, I take your name down, and basically when we start opening up the cohort, we start calling people, and based on interest, their ability to fulfill the obligations of the program, which are to attend the classes, to return some volunteer hours to men, etc., etc. You might get a brownie point extra for having multiple members of your family. Although personally I felt it was unfair to dock somebody because they're a retired couple with no children.
Yeah, because you still have mouths and stomachs magically.
And you got grandkids and nieces and nephews and a million other things. And that's what I'm finding, that even with the seniors that are involved in the program, who, by the way, are also, some of them are active participants because they have time, it's going from grandma and grandpa to sons and daughters and kids that don't live in that household or actually may live very close to them. So, basically I mean, there is, of course, we do look at income level and things like that. We look at where they're living in terms of service area. We try to keep it relatively close to Pacoima.
So do you use the same service area that the rest of the Pacoima programs use?
More or less. We're a little bit more flexible because we are not in a position to have to turn down so many people.
Okay,
as in the medical and the dental program. So occasionally I will leave the service area slightly. This time I've got a woman who is got arthritis and in a wheelchair, but she's not in our service area. Nevertheless, I decided, hey, we can provide this woman with a garden.
No.
We can provide this woman with a garden, although she's out of our service area. She's kind of the right type of person to.
Okay. And then, what would you say has been the overall impact and the benefit of offering food to your clients at all here? You know, sometimes, because I believe you have hot lunches, right? And if they're here at lunchtime and they can afford it, then it's $2, and if they can't, it's free. Is that right? And
yeah, well,
I'm never here at lunch, so that's what I hear.
Yeah, free or $3 actually. I believe.
Oh, free. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so you have the
but
lunch.
That tends to be. I mean, it's anybody that comes in the lobby. However, that tends to be people coming for emergency food. Most of my growers, or the people in Home Garden, the majority of those people are perhaps at a slightly higher economic level than the people coming here for food.
Yeah.
Because most of our people are living in homes that they own or renting in a more stable environment.
Yeah, I imagine your home gardeners are not the 30% of families you have living in garages.
Well, we do.
Depending on their relationships with their homeowners.
I mean, that's the issue. So that we will install a garden with anybody. If you live in a garage and the landlord says it's okay, we do vet that. We make you need to talk to your landlord, and we need to hear from him or her that you will allow this to be on property. We will accommodate anybody. If they express an interest and a desire and they follow through, we will meet them halfway. But there are times when the people that live in the garages will say no. We have some alternative plans. For example, we also do planters, which are just larger boxes but they're mobile. They don't sit. They're not sitting on the ground. They're raised a little bit, and we use those for people that have more difficult situations. I.e., they live in an apartment and they've got a little piece of cement out in front that they can put it in. The woman that I'm working with in the wheelchair, she's getting planters because she has access issues, and I'm not prepared to, at this point, to work with truly raised garden beds to her level, but the planters will work well for her. But I have quite a few people in apartments or garages that get smaller quantity, smaller boxes because it fits in with their circumstances.
Okay. So you have food that's access to people who have money and can afford gardens, and people who are very, very poor, they can come in for the emergency food boxes.
Yeah.
And
there's crossover. I mean, I know some of my growers, I would say in some cases, they definitely used to receive food.
Honey, I know you are poor, and I love you very much. We are almost done. But I need to not have Dancing Baby in the background of my presentation. Okay? Write me a story about how bored you are. Write me a fairy tale about what if a troll came to kidnap you to save you from your boredom. Okay.
Well, I think it is. Not everybody in the growers is not receiving food. I have done a little bit of my own investigation in terms of looking at the people I'm working with to find out what is the cross. Are they working with other departments in men? They're slightly elevated. I find that more of my participants are involved in other programs in men at the Education and Training Center, meaning they're people that are gardening, but they're also sewing, or they're taking English language classes and they're gardening, so they're working in that realm. Some of them I find had been receiving food boxes, and then the situation has changed for them economically or personally. They've stopped receiving the food boxes and now are working in training programs. So that sounded like a step in the right direction.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about Mend is it tries to solve people's poverty issues by giving them the language programs and the jobs programs, but it makes poverty survivable, which a lot of programs aren't there. Some people don't say, oh, well, you're living in very low income environment, but we're not going to try to make that sustainable for you because we're just going to judge your situation and say, no, that's not happening. And you can be poor and still be very, very happy. And people don't, I think that when you come from a more affluent background, you don't necessarily see that.
Right.
But my grandparents on each side were completely poor. So in the summertime when the kids weren't in school, my dad and his brothers went off with my grandpa, and they went and they picked fruit, and they did farm labor. And my dad during the school year would go in the mornings and he would pick fruit, then go to football practice, then go to school, do homework, and then go back to the fruit stand where he would slice the fruit.
Wow.
So he is 67 years old, and he will not eat a plum no matter what.
Oh,
He's like, plums and figs, no, I'm over it. Like, he spent his entire high school doing that. So, so when my brother tried to pull the I'm too busy to get a part-time job stick, it did not fly. Because you just, if you had the means and the ability, then you hustled. But just because you were low income and poor didn't mean that they weren't ever happy. Like, none of them remember being unhappy.
Oh, yeah.
And, my mom had to get a job at 14. So, but people forget that, and then when my mom got married and started working and had money, then all of a sudden, she became very judgmental about poor people. So when I said, hey, they're so loud, I'm sorry. When I said, hey, I'm going to start working with homeless people on Skid Row, my parents gave me a really hard time. My mom did. Like, I can't believe you're going to hang out with those people. Those people are poor, they're gross, they're scary, they're whatever. So I ended up starting a blog called Homeless in LA, where I would just describe, like, this is what I do all day, and these are the people I meet, and the value of who somebody is not related at all to the number of pennies that they have in the bank. And you constantly have to make that difference. But people forget, because once you move into a place where you have more social standing, more social purchase, you have more privilege, it's easier to say that other situation now looks so unattractive, because it is unattractive, but I'm afraid of it, and because I'm afraid of it, I'm going to demonize it, and now that I'm demonizing it, I'm not going to help any of those people because I'm going to call them all bad. Wow. And, and I saw that happen in my own family, which I find ridiculous.
It's funny because I have a very similar experience, in that I come from a blue-collar family. So there was a kind of a minimum standard of everything, but there was definitely not a lot of extra money there. And recently, with the whole Trump healthcare thing going on, my mother was unfortunately talking about Trump and how she likes what he's doing and blah blah blah. And one of the things I said was like, how can you support this issue, especially in healthcare, that knowing full well that I did not have healthcare for nearly a decade because I couldn't afford it or have it, and that you, especially as a young person, when I was living with it, we were a very modest family, and trying to make ends meet was a difficult. How can you now sit back here and say, you know, these people don't deserve healthcare; they have to work harder for it? I don't understand that gap in thought between what you were.
Yeah, there's an
25 years
entire
ago.
cognitive disconnect.
She doesn't. Yeah, now that she's 70 years old and retired and they've got everything paid off and they're kind of comfortable, I think there's like a memory loss as what it was like 30 years ago when they were not so comfortable and not so stable.
Well, I liken it to, you know, when people have, like, they say when you give birth, like you forget the pain. You know, and when you're not in poverty or you're not in constant pain and struggle, you're more comfortable. You forget how intense that was until you have to go through it again, and you're like, oh yeah, this really sucked. You know, and hopefully you never go through it again. Moving
out here was a big change for me, I have to say. Visually and everything. I said, moving from Hollywood and a nice house and all of this nice area, and then suddenly feeling like this is not my space, this is not me, this is not. It doesn't look what I'm used to, and it took me a while to kind of accept this as my own and say, hey, I don't have to live in a beautiful lily white community to be happy.
You can adapt it to your space. So tell me, can you show me a little bit around,
Sure.
like some of the food?
Let's do it, yeah.